You may begin.
We affirm social media is necessary for democracy. We defend social media as, quote, forms of electronic communication through which users create online communities to share information, ideas, personal messages, and other content. And it is necessary and possible to do without for democracy, which is a government by the people. All definitions are by Merriam-Webster. In a digital world, democracy now has different entities that uphold its necessary component factors. These entities include social media on the macro level. With the unionizing online and community building, democracy is now possible to do without social media. Therefore, social media crafts the tools that uphold a modern democracy. Contention 1, social media creates democratic movements. Social media is the sole entity that promotes and facilitates democratic movements. 1, Ethan Zuckerman of 2018 studying social media and democracy writes that social media is platforms, networks, and tools that offer ways to share information and inform on issues while ignoring social, cultural, or geographical borders that appear to have marginalized those without this new voice and autonomy that social media now gives. And 2, research done by Monica Anderson for the Pew Research Center of 2018 found the hashtag Black Lives Matter has been an archetypal type example of modern protests and political engagement on social media. The hashtag has been used on an average of 17,002 times per day. This engagement has allowed for movements such as Black Lives Matter, March for Our Lives, Me Too, and other various movements that have led to physical and even epistemological change. And 3, according to Al Sakafath writing about social media's impact in 2015, social media is the necessary component to help developing countries to facilitate democracy. They find that in developed worlds like the United States, we tend to undermine social media's role in democracy because of our privilege. Whereas countries like Yemen, social media is an amazing opportunity for development and democracy. Miracles can be created through social media, related surveys and awareness campaigns, but more importantly, social media is a great tool to convey accurate information and keep the public in developing countries such as Yemen informed. Contention 2, social media upholds democratic ideals. Democratic ideals consist of ideals and practices that promote community building in ways that facilitate the people. 1, Ethan Zuckerman of 2018 writes that social media has efficient mechanisms for the flow of communication while forcing individuals to engage in a constant process of self-definition, enhancing critical thinking and democratic practices. And 2, Luis Brandeis of 2018 writes about social media's influence on democracy. He writes that social media is a perfect example of using democracy because it allows us to gain connection between politicians and the public. Social media is affordable access to information, of voicing voter concerns, and adding another communication channel between voters and politicians. And lastly, 3, social media also upholds democratic ideals by community building. Frankie Wallace of 2019 argues that social media allows for people to form groups in community building, such as those questioning their sexuality, ethnic minorities, and other various interests that aids people in building relationships. Contention 3, social media puts democracy in action. In a modern world, social media is a stepstone for effective democracy. 1, in a news article by Hilary Gorgees in 2018, they have analyzed how fake news and the bad entities of social media has affected democracy. It finds that while some studies have shown how widespread fake news links are, studies have not yet shown that this disinformation campaigns had an influence on voters. Even though there is fake news in the status quo and is seen to be growing, it has yet to have an effect on democracy. Thus, these cons don't outweigh the benefits of social media and its effect on democracy. And 2, additionally, a marketing institution named Duct Tape Marketing studying social media found that social media helps the development of crowdsourcing. This entails building communities of certain buyers of goods and services to the social sphere to help shape a product through design input and productive feedback. This means the development of goods and services such as technology, political campaigns, or any kind of democratic entities that are allowed to get constructive feedback and find ways to be better. Not only does social media build communities, but it helps in the development of technology in society while building and facilitating democratic tools that put democracy into action. Thus, social media allows for crowdsourcing to entail and make the economy and democracy better under social media. Thus, to conclude, social media is a necessary component of democracy. We have provided 12 unique points to uphold this, along with 9 credible sources that further support our argument. We have recognized and analyzed the cons of social media like fake news, but has little to no effect on democracy. We have proven that social media helps some politically marginalized by facilitate monumental activism and change, while community building allowing for us to get in touch with the government officials directly. You should have an ethical calculi where you should evaluate every point made and how that intersects with helping marginalized people, which is the heart of democracy, those people who have been historically and politically excluded from democracy institutions in the past. Movements like Black Lives Matter, including the recent petitions and demands by our own Student Government Association here at UNT, are getting their macro level attention because of social media. Social media upholds ideas that are uniquely democratic and allow it to gain on a macro level scale. Thus, it is vital that you vote affirmative to recognize the role that social media has in our modern democracy. Thank you.
That's good. Okay, and another 5 minutes. We've got the Keeley, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Maybe.
Sure, social media is a good way to gain information, but with every pro, there is a con. With that being said, social media is not necessary for democracy. I'll begin by listing a few couple standards that social media defines. Condition 1, beauty. Social media puts out an image of what beautiful is. For example, the Kardashians, known for their beauty and plastic surgery. This is making an impact on young boys and girls' self-esteem, dramatically increasing the suicidal rate due to insecurity and the feeling of not fitting in because they aren't as popular. Putting that card there. 2, popularity. Social media defines who is popular by exhibiting the amount of followers someone has and the amount of likes or views someone gets on a post. Moving to contention 2, harms of social media on society. I will list several harms that social media has on society. First, lack of socialization, cyberbullying, lack of productivity, expectations, idolizes alcohol and drugs, loss of privacy, lower grades, psychological and mental disorders. Contention 3, false accounts and cyber hacking from Russia. Facebook acknowledged that before and after last year's presidential election, between January 2015 and August of 2017, 146 million users may have seen Russian information on its platforms. Google admitted to 1,108 Russian-linked videos and Twitter to 36,746 accounts, far from bringing enlightenment to social media. Contention 4, teen suicidal rates. According to the New York Post, in a study published in the Psychological Science publications, teens' use of electronic devices, including smartphones, for at least 5 hours daily, more than doubled from 8% in 2009 to 19% in 2015. These teens were 70% more likely to have suicidal thoughts or actions than those reported 1 hour of daily use. Moving on to condition 5, fake news. A huge problem with social media is that the fact that although there are people who wish to promote truthful and beneficial causes, like the AF has said, there are also people that intentionally promote fake news as it is considered a profitable market. Such argument has been proven before, and this will be covered later in the debate. Contention 6, social media and democracy internationally. The United States is not the only country facing problems with social media. After all, we wish to understand social media and its impact on democracy. We have to see how this is damaging the whole wide world. Internationally speaking, social media has worked to some extent to expose anti-democratic countries and bring some change, but unfortunately, it has not been good change. Rather than liberating the countries into a free, democratic world, social media has been used as a double-edged sword since more and more countries use social media to further target people and silence their attempts to liberate themselves. Moving on, politicians spend millions of dollars on advertisements when they could instead be used to make changes in this country. With expected earnings up to $400 million from political ads in 2019 alone, Zuckerberg's supposed defense of free expression is under scrutiny. Politicians use social media and democracy in order to control what we see without us even being aware of it. We have become so involved in the world of social media that we do not realize that it cannot effectively be used to make change, because change requires action, not like a like or retweet. Moving on excerpts from expert testimony. Social media, bad for democracy. Democracy has existed since 508 BC. Facebook, 2004, MySpace a year earlier in 2003. Since then, democracy has seen no evidence of improvement in the United States. Although most people didn't think that these statements were true, there was a very strong link between the belief that they were true and the way people voted. As the AF has stated that social media helps promote democracy, but Judge, consider the Greensboro sit-in, the women's suffrage movement. In the 1960s, we did not have social media, and what did the Greensboro sit-ins do? They promoted change for the 1960s. They actually gained colored people rights to actually end segregation in public settings. In the women's suffrage movement, what did they do? They went out and marched. They committed action. They didn't like or retweet or post on Facebook or social media, as the app is saying. The women's suffrage movement, they actually went out and fought for their rights. The app did not state how any of their social media claims is benefiting democracy. They did not state how it's actually affected change. And Judge, I proved to you 2 ways that without social media, we have affected change.
It's you. Emily came in, so I was like, oh no, I can't really.
Okay. You guys ready for the question? I'm gonna start. I have a first question. How does beauty and like those kind of standards affect democracy?
Well, as you define democracy from the Merriam-Webster, I believe that it was a government from which the people. You said something about how like the people form the government and how we like. Can you restate your
right? So like our like democracy definition is a government by the people. So like we talk about like
right. So a government by the people is like your key word, the people. So like we wouldn't have a democratic like republic if we didn't have the people. So I think like involving the people's mental health.
How does democracy like how does like beauty and like beauty standards directly affect democracy and like voting patterns?
Because as the NEG, we're saying that social media is not necessary for democracy because like social media has all these harms that beauty affects mental health, and if someone's mental health is disturbed, they cannot like actively and
okay, where's your evidence that says that like they don't have good mental health because of these beauty standards that affects voting patterns?
I stated the New York Post.
Okay, what's the warrant to that? Actually, I'll move on. I have another question. Our evidence in the 1AC does a pretty good job talking about how, like, in terms of cyber hacking and fake news, that Germany and the status quo is trying to regulate that, and like this regulating.
But that's not in the affirmative resolution. We're not talking about regulating anything. You're stating that social media is necessary for democracy. It doesn't include any regulations. But I do.
No, right. Our argument is that because the cons of fake news and cyber hacking, that is a non-unique argument because in the status quo, governments are already trying to regulate that and like make sure that doesn't happen. So like that con doesn't happen. Like that's not like that's a non-unique argument. Like
but
I mean, like counteractive our evidence in the.
But I mean, it's like literally.
So second speaker is correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and
We affirmative have proven that social media is necessary for a modern democracy. We have shown in our 3 points that we showed in our cases stronger than the negative, and how our pros outweigh their cons. We proved that social media creates democratic movements such as Black Lives Matter movement, Me Too, and March for Our Lives. We have continued that social media upholds democratic ideals. Social media platforms promote and facilitates democratic movements. Platforms and networks and tools that offer a way to share information into issues that help marginalize those who without new voice, or with a new voice which social media gives us. Using the article, The Things That Social Media Gives for Democracy by Ether Zuckerman, we have shown that social media tool is a tool for democracy because it's participatory. It's up to the people to be reformed and utilize the information that they give and what they want. Louis Bredas in 2018, writing on social media influence democracy, writes that social media is a perfect example of using democracy because it allows to gain connections between politicians and to the public. Social media is accessible and inexpensive to access to this information. Voicing, voter concerns or adding another platform through communications between voters and politicians. This helps marginalize people throughout society who don't usually have a voice in democracy, which is the heart of democracy. Lastly, also, social media puts democracy in action, In a news article of Hillary Delores in 2018, we also see that the study of fake news does not affect even voter patterns. While this is still being regulated currently, the issue of fake news that the negative brings up isn't a threat to democracy, therefore it's invalid. Fake news, and still bringing up to Germany regulating, it doesn't affect voter patterns, so the removal of hate speech or fake news or any other illegal content within the 24 hours, he suggests that, however, regulation by social media platforms themselves have reduced pressure from the government action. Again, the negative now looking into the longer picture, this shows that the dangers of you eliminating those platforms, this will affect the democracy. I'd like to add that Levas is set to pressure legislative on fake news and campaigns will increase this, with Germany now requiring social media platforms to remove those things. I'd like to add that Ethan Zuckerman, again, on 67 things that social media can do for democracy. By sharing content with social personal networks on social media, individuals signal the issues on the most important and engage the constant process of self-definition. In that process, they advocate for friends to pay attention to these issues as well. Essentially, social media provides an effective mechanism to a two-step flow of communication. Social media invites us to become opinion leaders, as documented by Paul Lazar and Ethan Katz. At least that our circles of friends can make a process of entertaining and gamifying a role and influence by rewarding up with the second numbers of our tweets or posts or like that you share with your friends. The resolution asks us to defend whether social media is necessary for a democracy, not that it's good or bad. Keep this in mind, make the negative proven that the social media is bad. It's not how it disproves that the social media is necessary for a modern democracy. Social media is necessary for that, doesn't mean that social media is bad. The resolution hasn't focused on modern democracy, so any new evidence that was in the past that the negative brings up is irrelevant because it doesn't have social media platforms. It didn't exist at that time. Looking ahead, we're only talking about modern democracy, not that's brought into the past. The negative also is focused only on micro-level problems, such as beauty or cyber hacking. We've all gotten that we've been regulated, and they focus only micro-level problems, where we affirmative have focused on bigger picture and a long run for our democracy, more on a macro-level issue. Thus, that we have proven that social media helps with modern democracy. Our side has the ethical and logical approach to each point that is being made, where we evaluated each point that how it intersects with helping marginalizing people, which is exactly what democracy is. Social media upholds these ideals and specific of democratic, and while we recognize the cons of fake news, it's still unnecessary, or it's still not necessary since it's still being regulated and doesn't affect voting patterns. It is still necessary for a modern democracy.
Ready?
All right, give us 1 second.
Ready?
All right. I would like to start by defining democracy. So our definition of democracy is a government in which the supreme power is vested in the people and exercised by them directly or indirectly through a system of representation, usually involving periodically held free elections. So social media has revolutionized how we consume and spread opinions and news, but it is not all for the better. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey said, "We believe political messages should be earned, not bought." While both Twitter and Facebook were established in the early 2000s, the seemingly endless pool of information floating in the digital realm has become the new normal. According to a 2018 survey, 2/3 of American adults use social media as a primary news source. Since their establishment, Facebook and Twitter have both deployed algorithms that follow the relevance model and show users the posts and news they statistically prefer to consume. Politicians have embraced the influence of social media in their advertising campaigns. Since January, President Trump's re-election campaign has posted more than 2,000 advertisements on Facebook that include the word invasion to strategically sway voters' perception of immigration. Kind of like when we're talking to a friend about something specific and then we find about it later on our timeline. In this way, social media and these politicians control what we see and how we respond to it. Although the app states that fake news has no impact on democracy through social media, this couldn't be farther from the truth. The Journal of Democracy's political scientist Ronald Daver wrote an essay on the role of social media in modern politics. The core feature of social media is that it gives its democratic promise, the rapid spread of information, and can be used against democracy through information overload. Ronald compares this to a tsunami. An always-on, real-time information tsunami creates the perfect environment for the spread of falsehoods, conspiracy theories, rumors, and even leaks. Unsustained claims and narratives go viral while the fact-checking efforts struggle to keep up. Members of the public, including researchers and investigative journalists, may not have the expertise, tools, or time to verify these claims. And by the time they do, the falsehoods may have already embedded themselves in the collective consciousness. Meanwhile, fresh scandals or outlandish claims are continuously raining down on users, mixing fact with fiction. Worse yet, studies have found that attempts to squash rumors through direct refutation may facilitate their diffusion by increasing fluency. Donald Trump and his allies in the more unethical parts of American conservative movement employ a similar strategy. The president lies a lot, and while the mainstream press debunks him, the right-wing outlets spread those falsehoods or manufacture supporting evidence on social media, where they cement as fact in the eyes of the president's hardcore supporters. In a Center of Information Technology and Society at Santa Barbara, among these who believed none of these fake news stories, 89% casted ballots for Hillary Clinton in 2016. Among those who believed one fake news item, this level of electoral support fell to 61%. But among those who have voted for Obama in 2012 and believed 2 or 3 of all these falsehood assertions, only 17% voted for Clinton. This only further proves that fake news does in fact have an impact on the world of democracy through social media. Another study from researchers at the University of Oxford found that conservative users were overwhelmingly more likely to spread junk news. On Twitter, a network of Trump supporters consumes the largest volume of junk news, and junk news is the largest portion of news links they share. The Oxford researchers write, extremely hard-right Facebook pages, distinct from Republican pages, share more junk news than all the other audiences put together. And the major platforms do seem to make this crisis worse. The Oxford Institute did research on Russia's IRA and how it's impacting democracy through social media. The key figure here is Russia's Internet Research Agency, which is essentially a troll factory. The Knowledge Report studied 10.4 million tweets, 1,000 YouTube videos, 116,000 Instagram posts, and 61,000 unique Facebook posts published from 2015 to the end of 2017. The IRA created social media accounts under fake names on every available platform, not just Facebook and Twitter, but also Instagram, YouTube, Reddit, Tumblr, Pinterest, Google, and even on Vine. The range of tools, memes, targeting philosophies deployed on the propagandist is also deeply impressive. The Russians relentlessly target African Americans. It created dozens of websites disguised as African American in origin with names like blackmattersus.com, blacktivist.info, and blacksoul.us. They created different fake accounts on social media in order to influence individuals. The Oxford report found the same. IRA activities were designed to polarize in the U.S. public and interfere in elections by encouraging African American voters to boycott elections or follow the wrong voting procedures in 2016, and more recently prompting Mexican American and Hispanic voters to distrust U.S. institutions, encouraging extreme right-wing voters to be more confrontational and spreading junk political news and misinformation to voters across the spectrum. So what does this all mean? It simply means that the world has changed and that democracies are into a new ballgame. Manipulation of our social media environment by foreign as well as domestic actors is now the new normal. Judge, we mentioned that the Greensboro sit-ins and the women's suffrage movement proving that social media is not necessary for change in our democracy. In the resolution, it does not say modern, it says democracy. Or to put it more simply, social media now poses an existential threat to the kind of liberal democracy we like to think that we have.
Yeah, you went over time. Okay. Okay, now for the crossfire. Okay, you have 2 minutes. You may begin.
What evidence do you have that says that fake news event affects democracy? Because we have evidence that says it doesn't.
So as I mentioned before in my argument, those that believe the fake news stories, so it basically affects how we cast ballots. Yeah, so 89% cast ballots for Hillary Clinton in 2016, and those who believed one fake news item, the support fell 61%. So even if it's fake news, people still believe it, and it affects how we vote.
But the evidence of here is it doesn't affect voter patterns, so that's up to the voter if they wanted to vote for them. That's democracy in its heart. So, I mean, you use information how you utilize information. So.
Okay, so moving on. Do you believe that the rise in suicidal rates and depression due to social media is a good thing for our country?
That doesn't affect democracy. Where does that affect? Where does your argument where social media or
Moving on.
suicide?
If our civilians are mentally disturbed, how are they able to exercise in our democracy?
Can you repeat that question?
If our civilians are mentally disturbed, how are they able to exercise in our democracy, as in voting?
I would like to ignore that question, but I'd like to ask, how does beauty affect democracy?
Alright, so basically through social media, the concept of beauty and popularity is more important than they think, because if we are unable to successfully regulate posts like this, how can we regulate political speech that is much more controversial? Also, in your argument, you said that eliminating these platforms, as in social media, will pose a threat to democracy. How do you think that is?
Well, because we had evidence where it shows that Germany, where they were out of that, they have had more pressure to the government.
And in dealing with fake news, do you think? Never mind.
We now have our third speakers. Third speakers, are you ready? Okay, and you may begin.
To summarize our argument, social media is necessary for democracy. As we stated, it serves as a great platform for our society to inform themselves about world issues, and it gives them the chance to express themselves. Technology has taken over the last decade, and it continues to rise. Through this technology, we are able to control presidential elections through this platform. This power social media has. Social media creates an online community between one another, which puts social media as a macro-level perspective. In this era we live in today, we can look at the dominant approach of political views and how the people take in information is what truly makes up democracy. In order for democracy to be effective, it needs the public's trust and attention. In return, it gives the people a voice in politics and gives them a chance to have some type of decision in democracy. Social media is needed in this environmental democracy we have, as it sets a standard for how decisions should be made. Far too often, the public is not meaningfully engaged in decisions that could affect their health, livelihoods, and culture, but through a social media that is possible to do. Now, the definition of democracy, which is a government by the people. Now, the negative side, they should have read the definitions in the first speech, which they ignored our definition, thus they should fall under our definition of democracy. To restate our 3 reasons that proves how social media is necessary for democracy. Social media helps build changes in democratic movements like Black Lives Matter. It gives people the chance to bring recognition to the social issue and stand up for what they believe in through these movements to make changes for better, and social media helps them do that. We can say social media has changed the world and democracy. As my teammates discussed the movements like Black Lives Matters and the effect it had through social media. The users created hashtags to give awareness to the motion and attract their communities to help them have a voice. Democracy is a government in which the supreme power is vested in people and exercised by them directly or indirectly through a system of representation. Social media upholds democratic ideals. Power are in people, therefore all democracies are participatory. Participatory democracy is the individual participation by the people in political decisions, which these decisions may or may not affect their lives. The use of social media is one of the opportunities to build a connection between the public and the government. This helps bring people together with same interests and construct movements that are evolutionary. Freedom to speak empowers citizens individually or collectively to advance their interests and shape the institutions whose decisions impact their lives. In the past 2 centuries, voters gathered most of their political information from the news media, newspapers, radio, TV, and in the last 2 decades, the internet. Fake news has been a theme that has been revolving in this era, and we know whether to what a certain source of information in regard to the fake news websites. Up to this day, there has not been any risk of it affecting the way our democracy is set up to be. Finally, the spread of fake news. Fake news can have the least impact on the way we look at social media and how it benefits democracy. Different people can take in variety of material presented across different platforms while still being a democratic ideal. Their political beliefs aren't affected by it. Therefore, fake news is a weak argument and it's irrelevant to our topic we're discussing by not being a deadly threat to democracy. In conclusion, we affirmative are positively sure that social media is necessary for democracy, whether or not it is bad or good for democracy. Our main resolution is to focus on modern democracy and the way we are dealing with these issues as of today. The rise of social media is absurd in the way it serves as a great impact to democracy. Social media platforms are used by 1 in 3 people in the world, and the way social media helps create a civic engagement by the people. Social media has become an important tool for democracy, reshaping our societies. Social media platforms today rule by absolute power, rolling out new rules, banishing members, and acting as an ultimate arbitrator about what information can be discussed or consumed. Now, in Germany, like I was talking about fake news, in Germany they are working on regulating fake news, this is a good example of how the government is in the process of taking down fake news. So that's another reason how fake news is irrelevant to the topic.
Okay. Okay. Meg, are you ready?
This one's 3 minutes, right?
Hmm?
The crossfire.
But yeah.
Yeah, the crossfire is 2 minutes.
Mm. Okay. Ready?
All right.
Okay, you may begin.
All right. To further support the fact that social media is not necessary for democracy, I would like to focus now on the social media giant called Facebook. Facebook was first launched in the year 2004 with the original purpose of connecting people with their friends and family. Mark Zuckerberg himself made this statement about Facebook's intent. Yet, we have seen Facebook drastically evolve over the years from a simple platform in which we could easily talk to that one relative who lives far away to a company that is now being used worldwide at a scale never seen before. We have heard previously that social media such as Facebook has allowed people to also speak up in a democratic fashion, but how effective is this approach? Facebook is currently under fire for having allowed ads that tampered with our 2016 presidential elections. Fake ads and fake news have surged over the past years on social media. I want to bring our attention to a piece from the Washington Post in which Yael Eisenstadt, former intelligence officer, diplomat, and White House advisor, stated that in her short time working for Facebook, she came to realize that Facebook profits partly by amplifying lies and selling dangerous targeting tools that allow political operatives to engage in a new level of information warfare. If one thing is clear to me from this is that this is not how democracy works. Unless of spreading democracy now means that we must lie to the people. With this in mind, it is also clear to us that Facebook simply does not care about democracy. All they care about is gaining money, which apparently is acquired by selling lies to the people. Now you may be wondering whether or not this claim about Facebook prioritizing money or retelling the truth is accurate or not? Well, that was put to a test recently by Elizabeth Warren, one of the highest Democratic Party politicians currently running for president. What Warren did was that she went ahead and submitted a false ad to Facebook's ad platform, which stated that Mark Zuckerberg had endorsed Trump for re-election. Believe it or not, this ad was almost immediately accepted by Facebook and was ready to be ran through the platform. Of course, Warren stopped this from happening since this was only done as a test of just how willing Facebook is to run a series of lies on its platform as long as money is involved, which unsurprisingly it is very willing. Following this incident, we would like to believe that Facebook finally realized it had to do something about this. Well, once again, unsurprisingly, they did not. About a week after Warren challenged Facebook with her false ad, Zuckerberg was brought into Capitol Hill to be questioned. During the questioning, Zuckerberg was asked whether or not lies would be taken down on Facebook if found on his platform. To this, Zuckerberg responded that he did not know the answer off the top of his head. Now, this answer to me has two possible meanings. One, Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, is completely unaware of what policies his company has. Or my second theory, he is omitting information on purpose since he knows that it is not a moral policy. So what exactly is Facebook's policy regarding this issue? Well, Zuckerberg has stated that despite the massive amount of lies being shown to the people, Facebook's policy shall be to not police political speech. He supported this claim by stating that he believes that we must continue to stand for free expression, and that the comments made by political leaders, even if false, were newsworthy and in the public's interest to hear and debate. He was right in that this is causing a debate, but it is our belief that he is wrong in believing that lies are a part of a democracy. We believe that democracy should be based on the truth, not on lies. Given the fact that Facebook is unable to remove political lies from its platform because it would mean a loss of profit for them, it is clear to us that social media is not necessary for democracy to work, as it is clear that it is more damaging than beneficial.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, Crossfire, 3 minutes.
Do you guys have a question?
All right, first of all, y'all made a lot of claims that were straight up contradictory with other statements you have said and or the truth we have presented. First of all, the topic that we are debating is social media is necessary for democracy. Y'all stated this explicitly many times, and that statement should be very obviously flatly false to anyone who reads it. Democracy has existed since 200, 500 BC, depending on who you ask, in different forms. Facebook, like we've stated many times, was created in 2004, and you have made the assertion that we're talking about Facebook and we're talking about democracy in the modern sense. Any description of modern democracy that has started in 2004, I would
Right, so our argument is...
Excuse me, please. You'll definitely find pushback saying that there's not a chance that any type of democracy could have been started in 2004.
Can I answer your question?
No, you can't. Say more questions.
Want me to answer it?
Can you answer it?
Yeah, I will. Our argument is that under a modern democracy, we have a macro-level institution. So, like, right, you heard that, like, democracy has been around forever, but our argument is that under a modern democracy, which social media upholds, we are allowed to get a macro-level institutional movement.
But you do realize that the resolution itself is democracy.
Right, so since
like,
you can't
tweak
right,
it and
can I
add
answer your
modern.
question? So since you conceded our definitions in the first speech because you, like, said, yeah, your definition says this, so we say this. Since you
Okay, how
didn't
does the next definition differ from the app definition?
Right, so we say government by the people.
Okay, so by the people don't the people use social media? And if the people are mentally disturbed, how are they able to actively and participate in electing good representatives if they are mentally disturbed?
One, we pointed out that there's no like constitutive evidence that warrants out that how like this.
I mean, we stated how the New York Post and like the
right.
So,
So like,
excuse me, can you finish your statement right there?
Right. So like we again have like pushed like there's no like constitutive warrants that like prove how like the Kardashians and like their beauty image like hurts voting patterns. And two, we argue that like even if that does, it doesn't matter because there's still a macro level institution that helps like those that are continuously marginalized in the status quo who have empirically been excluded from like democratic movements. And under the modern democracy, which we define under our definition that you conceded in your first speech, social media upholds that at the macro level and allows for like a lot of benefits. Which
okay, thank you. Y'all keep mentioning Black Lives Matter and how it produces change. However, what change has Black Lives Matter like promoted, or like what does it mean to? Like, what have it changed that?
And to continue that, you have mentioned Black Lives Matter, I think at least 5 or 6 times at this point. I think it's plain to see that the Black Lives Matter movement can be compared to a lot of other social movements that have benefited African Americans in America in the last 100 years. Notably, Martin Luther King. He marched from Selma, Montgomery.
Our argument is at macro level. If social media was around during MLK, imagine the more macro level institutions and changes.
But that's
I think it is
that,
laughable to compare that anything that Black Lives Matter has accomplished to anything that people like Malcolm X or Martin Luther King has accomplished.
Right.
Black Lives Matter succeeded in one thing.
Black
Lives Matter succeeded in one thing, and that is decreasing the social tensions in America and increasing racial tensions.
What's your question?
what does Black Lives Matter change? Like, y'all keep mentioning Black Lives Matter. What is the change to it? What is the change that they have brought?
Do you want me to answer that?
What time is it?
It's already
I asked
time.
before this time.
I'm ready.
Alright, so now we just need the final speakers. You may begin.
Yeah, starting. So are there a slew of voters that you can vote from the curbside for plenty of reasons. The first voter is definitions. We've argued that the negative should have read a definition in the first speech. They even conceded during the first speech, yeah, we'll fall into the definition. Here's an argument against that. They read definitions in their second speech. They should have done that in the first speech. Thus, you concede under our definitions to evaluate, have a framework of what democracy, what is necessary, and how social media upholds that. Second is a macro level and marginalized. We talked about how if you vote for the negative, you vote on like the same pattern of view, like continue those have been constitutively and empirically marginalized in the status quo. We argue a macro level institutionalized that social media allows to uphold the necessary components of democracy. This means, again, Black Lives Matter, March for Our Lives, the Me Too movement, and other empirical movements that have allowed epistemological and relational change on social media. We have read evidence from Hillary George's 2018 that says that the hashtag Black Lives Matter is been used 17,000 times per day, and those hashtags are surrounded about important conversations that allow those who have been empirically marginalized to connect to voters. We also have evidence that shows how social media upholds macro level necessary change for democracy because it allows for the connection of politicians and those who have been excluded from democratized institutions and government conversations to now get a hold to their politicians and have a direct voice to that. Thus, if you vote for the negative, you concede, you vote that you're going to allow to keep these marginalized people who have been empirically marginalized continue to be marginalized. They have conceded our evidence that says that social media now allows this new platform and new outlets for people to directly talk to these specific democratic ideals and government bodies. They completely conceded that argument. The next order is political ads and/or campaigns. They continue to argue about Facebook and all this, but there's two main arguments to this. One, they continue to ignore our Hillary George's evidence from 2018. They did a study that explicitly says that while studying on how the 2018 midterms and the 2016 presidential election, looking at fake news and fake news campaigns or platforms did not have a direct correlation to affecting voter patterns. They keep saying that it affects voting patterns, but again, cross-checks proves and cross-checks checks that there has been no coherent analysis or warrant to disprove our claim. Our claim is that voting patterns are not directly affected by fake news. And they also continue to concede our evidence that says Germany right now in status quo is continuing to push firms to regulate this news of false information and fake news. And again, we're in the status quo. Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg are under congressional hearings to directly tie this. That's just another link argument to prove on how governments are going to continue to regulate fake news. And also, in the status quo, Twitter, the CEO of Twitter came out and said that they're going to ban political ads. This is completely non-unique in terms of their argument. They continue to concede the analysis and the warrants that we continue to do. Also, the fourth is Yemen. In our first contention we talk about from Al Sakaf in 2015, he writes that like I said, that social media allows for other developing countries to allow to promote democracy. We argue that in America, we continue to, because of our privilege, and we don't necessarily see on how social media necessarily affects democracy, but in places that are still developing, it allows for Yemen and those who are under wars and civil wars, and a lot of marginalized people in these outer countries are allowed to go on social media and allowed to affect and want to do democracy. And same for the Hong Kong protests. They're looking to the United States because the Hong Kong is trying to facilitate and regulate social media access. That proves that social media is a necessary component to help and form democracy. Also, fifth is an ethical calculi. This is the best ethical calculating framework you must have in the debate. Because of that, one, when you vote affirmative, you concede that yes, social media is necessary in a modern democracy. Again, that was in our definition analysis that they conceded in their first speech. But two, an ethical calculus allows you to realize that once you vote for the affirmative, you realize that social media allows for those that are consistently and empirically marginalized to allow to gain movements on the macro level. They also considered the analysis I did in my first speech and what my second speech partner did on the Student Government Association here at UNT, the Black Student Union, and what happened at the Hate for Our Speech campus event was horrific, and what they allowed to come out here and cite a protest and spread that on Twitter and Facebook, and the protest and the petition, got around like 4,000, and it's growing signatures, and this is allowed to go to the Board of Trustees meeting and allow for social media to like say, come out and do this protest and sign this petition. That would not have happened without social media. So this is a conceded argument that proves that because of social media in the modern democracy allows for macro level movements that help those who are constitutionally and empirical marginalized. You can continue to not clash our arguments, continue to yell at me during cross-sects. One, that doesn't like answer or clash to any of our warrants and or analysis arguments that we have. And two, they continue to concede that while beauty doesn't affect democracy, they don't explain any of the warrants or crossify or extend any of their evidence on how that social media is a con, is not necessary for democracy. They've argued that while social media has cons, they have proved why those cons are not necessary for democracy. We argue there are cons. We argue the cons will be regulated. They're going to be solved, like the status quo proves. But social media is necessary for democracy. Have an ethical calculus. Thank you.
Fourth speaker.
Okay. I'll keep this simple because it's a pretty simple topic when we boil this down to it. And I appreciate the pro side's passion. However, I think it might be time to take a breath and stop so ferociously defending corporations. We have stated many times of the proponency of Facebook and these modern social media platforms that is the basis of the topic we're discussing today. The pro side has said that Facebook and social media of relevant of terms of these people who can online and access these groups of political interests, is said that they have repeatedly stated that this can empower citizens. Does this empower citizens or does it empower corporations? If we think about it on a realistic level, the sites that we attribute to social media is Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter. These corporations, like we've said before, are interested in profits. These are free corporations. What is the product? We are the product. Any sense of freedom that you can find by contributing to discussions on these social media platforms is quickly lost in the disturbance and the frenzy of political veracity and online argument that has no ultimate end of benefit to the American people. Again, the pro side has argued many times, probably upwards of 10 times at this point, we've stated the macro level benefits of social media. Let's define these macro level benefits accordingly. These small interest groups, marginalized people, these can really be reflected as these echo chambers of extremist political thought. We've stated many times that social media can be prescribed with two different concepts: imaginary communities and these filter bubbles. As the political scientist Benedict Anderson has famously argued, as we've stated previously, that these communities will only enact the cohesion of extremist political groups that will enforce their ideas. These will push people to the political extremes and will not do anything towards enabling marginalized people or promoting third parties. The pro side has explicitly said, right after social media is necessary for democracy, that social media can be used to control presidential elections through this platform. This is a direct quote. I agree. Social media is used to control political elections through this platform. I'm glad we agree on that, as it has explicitly in the 2016 election. They tried to state that there has been no result of fake news. However, like we've stated from the Center for Information Technology and Society at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and we've discussed the percent of changed votes from Hillary Clinton and Obama voters through reading these fake news. The conclusive argument of this paper was that if these percentage of voters, even 17% of former Obama voters, had voted for Clinton in these states that went from blue to red, this would have changed the election entirely. The outcome would have not resulted in the election that we had seen in 2016, and Trump would not have been the president. If this cannot be contributed as an effect on social democracy and its effect on our political platform, I don't know what can be. Again, referring back to the macro level aspects of these social media benefits, we got to think about the people who actually benefit from these platforms. Voting age people in America are not us. If we consider who is politically active in this room, I doubt any of us voted in the Denton elections that were 2 weeks ago. However, I can guarantee you that many of the 60-something people who are in the age of 60s or their late 50s, those are the people who vote. And those are the people who join Americans for Trump Facebook posts in these massively, politically extreme, closed groups that will pass along fake information from one to another. This aspect in itself should be clear that the minds and the rational thinking that can be provided to us through the benefits of social media are wiped out by any type of political misinformation. The system of social media that we have experienced today is ripe for this information, or misinformation rather, to spread. Alright. I think that concludes. It's not that hard. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not a hard argument to make. Social media is a tool for people to spread their own ideas and listen to what they want to listen to. Martin Luther King is a great example of what social media or social movements could have done before social media. Any social movement that has existed since social media has not incorporated into any significant change compared to what has existed before.
Time. Okay. And
Good job.
good job. Good job to everyone.
Did one of you all bail on the last that we're supposed to have a person?